Our Hangout on Air is live. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there 2 extra minutes. We're having some excellent conversation in the green room about the green screen and the airport business that's going on behind me. I am broadcasting from the Martian International Airport, right on the Sea of Tranquility on the dark side of the moon, right next to Mars. Not really. Today, we are talking about break the cage, and I have a couple of really good things today. We had a good question that we're going to start off with Grizz ahead of time. But the first thing I want to talk about for a minute is what is break the cage? Why am I doing this, and what is this about? None of us, me included, and I'm a results on a rampage nutcase for decades, none of us are living up to our potential. None of us are doing the things that we could do. In fact, we have fantasies about that, right? We have the new movie coming out about somebody that can suddenly access 70 or 80 or 90% of their brain and make objects dance and fly and do whatever. And that has been a fantasy forever. We know from research that we don't access anywhere near the capacity of our brain, and we don't really know how to do that yet. There are some studies that show that, meditation is a tool that lets you access more of it. I can attest to that because I've been a 40-year practitioner of meditation, and I've had some miraculous healings in my own body, and part of my ability to accomplish the things I have, which is 3 or 4 lifetimes worth of stuff, I ascribe to that practice. But that's not what I really want to focus on. What I want to focus on is breaking the cage. We live in a set of self-imposed boundaries. It has been said that we don't see the world as it is, but we see the world as we are. So if that's true, and we see the world as we are, then how we see the world can change depending on how we choose to see it. So that's the frame that I want to lay in today. We see the world as we are, and that gives us the ability to change how we see it, therefore change how we interact with it, therefore change the results that we have. So the question that Grizz put in there is about our limiting beliefs, and that we tend to see what we expect to see, and that his question was, how do we surface those beliefs that are limiting us or causing us to see what we expect to see? So the answer, it may not be the only answer, but the one I'm going to give right now to set up the show is this. Finding in life or in people or in circumstances what we expect to find is called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency for us to see and find what we expect to see and find. So when we look around, we have a view that people are crooks, are dishonest or shady, or always trying to get an edge on us or get the deal, right? So we tend to see that. Preston, you just jumped on, I think. Would you mute for me, please? Thank you. If you could. Jump on that. So we tend to see what we expect to see. It's called confirmation bias, and that's great. We see what we expect to see. Confirmation bias means that. So if that's true, and it is, then the way to fix that is to change what we expect to see. And so the limiting beliefs that we hold, without going into a whole, what would be an entire hangout on how we got those, how we were raised, the environment that we were, our childhood experiences, the environment that we have, the environment that we allow to be around us now, and all of the things that we, that go on, that we allow to continue, are the things that address and affect and shape our confirmation bias and the lens through which we view the world. The key point I want to make here is that the answer to your question, Grizz, is yes, we see things what we expect to see. We do have beliefs that shape our view of things and what we perceive as the reality around us. And then your final question was, how do we surface those beliefs? Presumably so we can address them and change them if we want to. So step one is to be aware of confirmation bias. We see what we want to see, we see what we expect to see. Step two is aware that it is internally generated, that we can make that adjustment, and that we see the world as we are. So if you say, wow, I know that I see what I expect to see, I know that I see the world like I am, and that gives me enormous power, because that means by changing who I am and what I choose to look for, I can change the world. because the world is what I choose to see. Now, I'm not suggesting we can change others' behavior, but as we all know, there's a million different ways to interpret any given situation. Two people can see the very same act, very same interaction between two people. One person can say, that person's angry and hurting this other person, and someone else can see the situation from a different perspective and say, no, they're helping, and have a 180-degree polar opposite interpretation of the situation. So we know that that's true, and we've seen studies, I've seen studies, and I'm sure you've heard of cases where that is true. So here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk today about what I call the boundary game. The boundary game is directly addressing this belief system that we have that determines how much we can get done. The boundary game are the walls of the cage. The boundary game are the bars that keep us within our safe zone. The boundary game is the boundary that we choose, and I use that word again advisedly but intentionally. It is the boundary that we choose to allow us to confine our progress. Now, some people say, well, all I have to do is think different and everything's different. That's kind of a glib question, and the answer, unfortunately, is yes. It starts there, and that pause was intentional. It starts there. Because you know, and if you don't know, then this is part of the learning today. When we create a thought, or when we have a thought, it creates an emotion. It releases some chemistry in the brain. That chemistry moves into our body, causes some reactions. If we see a circumstance and interpret that saber-toothed tiger as charging at us, we experience a sight. We have a thought, saber-toothed tiger is charging at us. Or spouse is angry. Or some other external circumstance, we interpret that in a certain way, and then we have a feeling of fear. Well, that feeling creates chemistry in our body, and then we react to the feeling. So step one in surfacing those beliefs is being aware that they exist. Step two is making a conscious decision to become aware of that process that I just talked about. Step three is to decide to intervene. So know that it exists, become aware that I have the ability to do that, and then decide to intervene. Some people call that a cognitive intervention. You can give it whatever name you want, but what it is to say, wait a minute, I'm having a feeling. Okay, what am I going to do about that feeling? Because usually what we do is we have a thought, we have a feeling, and then we take an act, and we do without intervention. Thought, feeling, act. Thought, feeling, act. Sometimes we go thought, and then have a feeling, and then we have a thought about that feeling. So we see someone do something, we get jealous, then we have a thought that says I shouldn't be jealous, and then that creates another feeling, and we go back in this thought-feeling loop until we create an internal mess that, you know, derails us from our ability to take intelligent and intentional action. Okay, so after you've decided to take intervention, then you say, all right, how do I do that? What is it that I do? Now, there's two ways to do that. One is you can do it yourself, okay? You can decide that I'm going to get a tool, and you can do it yourself. There's lots of self-help books that have been written. One very powerful one is by Byron Katie called The Work, which is a series of 4 questions where you ask about the truth of a feeling or an idea or a thought that you have, and then you do some mental manipulation with it and get used to the idea that it could be the opposite of what you're thinking, and then you gradually learn to make peace with all these possibilities until you stop judging people and situations. I'm talking through it too fast because this isn't a class on the work. It's called The Work. It's given that name. That is just one method. There are other methods to do the cognitive intervention process or to create a pattern of new thinking. The key is I, Kellen, or I, Manny, or Griswold, or Christopher, or Joy, or anybody that's watching this on YouTube, I'm deciding to do something. That's step one after becoming aware. And then you can get a tool, and you can try different tools, and you can try to do it yourself. So that's one way to do it. I have engaged on lots of those, read hundreds, perhaps thousands of self-help books, and struggled with these processes to make changes in myself. That is a slow and arduous process, often. The faster way is to get some help through getting a coach, or if it's a serious problem, a counselor, depending on what the issue is and so forth. But the point is to get some outside help, because that outside person, I use the word coach because I am one, and that's the whole foundation of Break the Cage. So we'll put a comma here and tell you what Break the Cage is. Break the Cage is a phrase that I have. It is a 90-day personal reinvention program. It is for people who are ready to make radical change, who are ready to level up their idea of what is actually possible, and who are ready to take serious action. They're ready to take serious action. So really ready to make radical change. They're ready to take serious action, and they're absolutely committed to that. That's a 90-day personal reinvention program that I have, and that's why I call it Break the Cage. So let's go step back to where we were to the comma. If you're ready to do that and you get some outside help, that's why sports figures and actors hire coaches, because they need someone to look at their movements as they jump over the bar, or as they do the spins on the skates, or as they wind their way down the hill on the skis, or whatever it is, to say, wait a minute, you're doing this. I had a fabulous, I was going to say fantastic and fabulous, and kind of watered them up together, opportunity this week to have a VIP day with a new client who's a private coaching client, and spend all day with someone. That's an opportunity I get occasionally that is fantastic for both the client and for me. In that day, we were able to change significantly some beliefs and some ideas about that person's story, about the story they tell themselves, about who they are, and more importantly, how to use that to create business for themselves, to completely change the way they show up in their client's eyes or in their potential prospect's eyes. And so it was an honor to work with this person. We had like 10, 12 hours all day to work hard on that, worked on their, what I call the story toolbox. But it gave them some extremely powerful stuff, and they left buoyant and overjoyed with what they had now as tools. And so that was done in one day. And so the benefit of getting some outside help is that you can compress the time frame monumentally and significantly. First of all, you get immediate feedback from someone who knows, who's been there, who is able to see you from an unbiased perspective. You can get somebody that's a bit ruthless with you. You know what, that isn't working. That doesn't do what you're saying. Or that says, you know what, that's a story you're telling yourself. It's not true. And those are processes that if you do them yourself, it takes a long time. So you can get it done much more quickly, you can get it done more powerfully, and in addition, you can then set up an accountability process. That, in my experience, is why I picked the name The Execution Mentor as my title. Helen Flukiger, The Execution Mentor, model and mentor for those satisfied only with extraordinary results. I use that because accountability is the piece where most people fall down. They don't hold themselves truly accountable to the new discoveries, breakthroughs, mindset shifts, whatever it is that they have. And so they don't continue with that bulletproof accountability. So the things we talked about, that you said we were going to talk about today, first were why mindset matters. So we've just now covered that. Mindset matters because it's everything. The way that we see the world is how we react. And so by changing the mindset, you actually change your reality, because we don't see the world the way it is, we see the world the way we are. So changing that changes the world for us and everything about what we see and what we can do. The second thing, as I said, we'll talk about how to get a bulletproof self-esteem. So again, that goes back to doing what was created by Griswold's question to start with, which is how do we surface those beliefs? By deciding to, by picking a tool, and then by holding ourselves accountable to make changes in those beliefs, because we got the beliefs somewhere. If we got them somewhere, we can unget them. We can go get new ones. We can choose to go through the process of creating new beliefs. Neural research demonstrates today that it is possible to rewire our brains. We walk through the woods on a certain path and we wear a pathway through it. Soon it becomes familiar. The grass is worn out and the dirt shows, and it becomes the path through the woods. Our heads are the same. There's a stimulus or thought or a situation that goes in, it creates a certain reaction. Our brains have neuroplasticity, which means plasticity means the ability to be flexible or be reshaped, and neuro is, of course, the neural pathways, the pathways of chemistry and thought in the brain. So if you can rewire those pathways by creating a new one and then walking on it a lot, essentially using the path through the forest example, you can rewire your head. What that means is you can change something as simple as, somebody flips me off, my first reaction is to flip them off back, say bad things about their heritage, and then have my blood pressure go up 10 points. Natural reaction. You can change that so that your natural first reaction is, wow, I wonder what they're having trouble with today, without having your blood pressure go up at all. I can tell you that's possible because that's one of the ones that I have done. I no longer get the least bit fussed by anybody's actions on the road at all. And the reason is by doing it on purpose. It isn't that I fight with myself, I want to flip that guy off, that dirtbag. I just don't feel that way anymore. I simply eliminated that from my behavior set, my feelings. So that's just an easy one to understand because we all go through that and we all choose or don't choose to do something about it. That's one I didn't like. I didn't like the way I felt, so I fixed it. Any thought and then behavior pattern, thought, feeling, behavior pattern that you have, you can change. All right. So your choices are, when you have something, you identify a pattern in your life you don't want, is to stay where you are. And if that's working for you, you know, peace. You can change it yourself, and that tends to be the slow and lengthy way, and most people fail at that because they can't hold themselves accountable and they don't have a good external view. Or you can get some help. That's way faster and a lot more effective. It's certainly what I have done and what I recommend people to do. Breaking the cage, in this sense, is redefining the boundaries, redefining how you view what is possible. So let's go right back to the core. Each of us has 24 hours in a day. Each of us has a mind. We have the energy that's created by our thoughts, and we have the energy that's created by our actions. We have the ability to use our gifts and talents. Everybody has gifts and talents. My calling in life is to help people maximize their gifts and talents. I do it through Speed to Profit marketing. I do it through my Break the Cage coaching. I do it all the time when I meet and work with people in volunteer settings, which I do quite often as well. So that's my way of maximizing my gifts and talents in this venue. And in helping others do the same, I help people find, like this client I just had, today's Saturday, Thursday, all day, to a way to create the opportunity for him to maximize his gifts and talents by giving him that feedback and helping him create a new reality. And it was so powerful that at one point, this particular fellow completely was so emotionally reconnected that he had a complete breakdown and was sobbing for several period of minutes, and then was just intensely overcome and overwhelmed with the reality of the power of the new place and the new feeling. And it was intense. It was intense. All right. So the third thing I said that we would talk about, and we do this real quick, and then we'll open it up for everybody to have comments, and we'll check and see if there are additional questions or argument with what I've presented today. The third thing I said we'd talk about today in breaking the cage, which is redefining the boundaries, expanding the realm of what is possible, is the value of your personal journey. Now, in Speed to Profit marketing, I talk about the value of your personal story and creating unique branding and your unique selling proposition, and nothing is more valuable. In a similar way, on a parallel course, your personal journey through heartache, through sorrow, through misery, through victory, the ups and downs that you have experienced, the defeat and the victories, it doesn't matter if you're on the top of the mountain right now or in the valley, if you're in a happy place or in the toilet, the value of that journey cannot be overstated, and it cannot be missed if you're going to break the cage and create for yourself a new paradigm of possibility, a new paradise of pleasure that you can get. When I work with clients, I always say, pretend you're standing on one side of the Grand Canyon, and where you are right now is perhaps in pain. maybe physical pain, maybe mental pain, maybe spiritual pain, but it's the pain of prison. You're not able to do what you want to do. You're not accomplishing what you believe you could and should do. You look across the gap, and on the other side, you see yourself. But the self you see over there is one that is accomplishing, doing, that has done those things. And often we have conversations between the two people and so forth. But the vision of that reality, and then creating the steps to build the bridge across that gap, is the whole point of self-development. It is the point of self-betterment, self-improvement, breaking the cage, and all of the other metaphors that we might use to doing that. So the value of the personal journey is this. Every experience that we have, whether they're good ones or bad ones, painful or pleasurable, does one thing at least for us. It teaches us what works and what doesn't work. When we find things that don't work, we don't repeat them. When we find things that do work, we do repeat them. Now that might seem stupidly obvious, but I can't tell you in business, for example, how many businesses I consult with that are not continuing to do things that were successful for them in the past. And you wouldn't believe how many people who have done things they know fail continue to repeat those failed behaviors in the present in the vain hope that somehow they'll get a different response, which of course what Einstein defined as insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So the idea that we somehow stop doing things that are broken, do things only that work, is simple to say and difficult to do, and again requires an intentional decision and a cognitive process whereby we list and understand those things and even back it up. What were the feelings? And before that, what were the thoughts that led us into those successful or unsuccessful behaviors? And what would we rather do? And at what point do we need to intervene and change that? And again, in that process, you can try to do it yourself. And there are lots of tools and books that have been written to do so. And that is the slow way, in my experience. Or you can get some help and do it faster if you choose to, or if that's the desire that you have. Now some people, a lot of people actually are comfortable stewing around, spinning basically, in the present reality, and they live their lives that way and they seem to be comfortable there. Those are not candidates to break the cage. They are not candidates for massive achievement. They are not candidates for personal improvement. They love to run around the drama triangle between being victim, villain, and hero, and continue to adopt different roles as they spin their lives. That's unfortunate because it's an enormous waste of talent and potential. But for those of you that are determined to do more and to change, we have talked today about one path and one process to do that. Examining the boundary conditions, making an intentional decision to change them, focusing on the core beliefs and where they came from and how to do something about them. All right, we've got 5 minutes left. I'm done with the speech. Let's take a look for questions. Joy, do we have questions? And anybody that's on the strip, and there's a pile of you, thank you, please jump in and have your comments and questions.
Well, I was just talking about, I thought that was interesting. I put a comment in that about that triangle, you know, the victim, villain, and hero. And so I had always thought of something like that as being, you know, somebody else. So, you know, I'm the hero for this victim and this villain. But then often we'll find that we, you know, this happens within ourselves. So at any one time or at any one moment, we become our own victim, villain, and hero. And then it becomes this endless loop of, you know, I didn't do this right, or I didn't communicate this well, so, you know, I'm a lousy this or lousy that, and then we get into the villain stage, and then we have to bring ourselves up and be the hero again. So it can be a real struggle sometimes to get out of that triangle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The victim-villain triangle, it's called the drama triangle. I got that particular languaging from a fellow. In fact, it's the client that I worked with on Thursday. It's languaging that he uses. I've heard him use. I don't know where he got it. But anyway, perfect example. We do adopt multiple roles in our languaging and feelings, and it does get in the way of progress. Do we have any other questions that have been in the comment box, Joy, or folks that want to talk?
I've got something, Kelly.
Manny, go for it.
Yeah, Grizz and I just got out of a meeting where we were working on my landing page, and I think I spoke to you during your episode of where you said the niche, where you were bringing up the importance of the niche. And once I got the clarity that one thing you said was which group audience would you speak to most clearly. Once I got the clarity that the people I speak to most clearly, jargon and all, is physicians, and the people that I can speak to most clearly is physicians who are trying to get the hell out of medicine, pardon my French. So then everything else kind of flowed from there.
So tell me about that experience of getting the clarity that freed you up to talk in language you knew was talking to one narrow group.
Well, it's refreshing, and it provides a trajectory for me to like make progress, because Dr. V and I always joke about, okay, we're going to de-jargonize, we do a jargonvention, but at the end of the day, you have to like step through the stuff, and what I'm stepping through is going from jargon, which is part of my physician, my old doctor identity, to communicating with people on a normal level, which is part of my normal person identity. Yeah.
And knowing exactly who you're talking to specifically is intensely liberating, because then you know exactly how to say it, because you know who's listening.
Yeah, because I know they understand and recognize the jargon. So it frees me up to speak the jargon, but at the same time to be moving towards speaking less of the jargon, because that's part of what I want them to do to survive in the internet.
Beautiful example. Thank you. Who else has got a comment for us, or an example, or a question?
I have a question.
Go for it.
I put it in the stream also. Okay, so if you break the cage with someone else, do you run the risk of becoming dependent, and what are some steps to avoid that? And probably more importantly, maybe perhaps for at least myself, how do you avoid becoming codependent?
Okay, so that's a good question. Mentors that I hire, and when people hire me as a mentor, I'll use those examples, they're certainly never designed to be permanent. So I hire coaches when I want to get a certain thing done. So I might hire somebody for 90 days. That's why I have the 90-day reinvention program, and maybe 6 months. Longest I've stayed with one is about a year, but it was for a particular purpose. It wasn't for them to be my rescuer. It wasn't for them to be my hero or be my savior or anything like that. And the savior complex is dangerous, it's wrong, it's not healthy, it's not helpful, and all you're doing, all a person is doing if they do that, is substituting one crutch for another. And so it will definitely be up to the coach and the person who's willing to take action to intervene, mentally and openly, and discuss. I'm not your mother. That kind of I've had that conversation. I said it. Look, I'm not your mom. I'm not God. I'm not your mom. I'm your coach. This is the action you need to take when you're jumping over that to make more results. And you can either take it or not take it, and so forth. So it's a risk. It's a danger, and you just have to pay attention to the feelings that are developing on both sides, so that there's no savior complex or anything else, because then you substitute one crutch for another.
Thanks. Perfect.
Preston had a question. He's not on right now, but he was earlier. It said, self-esteem is great to have, but how do you not be too arrogant or too overconfident? So he says, I've met many with greater self-esteem than I over the years, but some seem so fake because they have too much self-esteem.
So thank you, Preston, for that fantastic observation and question. Arrogance is usually a camouflage for insecurity. Okay, self-esteem, if somebody's arrogant, that means that they're insecure, and they have to get their strokes by acting, yeah, I'm cool, and usually that means putting down other people. I don't have time to talk to you. You're beneath my something or other station, language, whatever it is. I'm talking down to you. That arrogance usually comes from some degree of insecurity that you're going to find out that I'm really not as cool as I pretend that I am, and that kind of stuff. So true self-esteem is simply an acknowledgement of your own worth as a person and your ability to add good to the world. Self-esteem is not measured by what other people think of you. When we falsely measure self-esteem by the strokes we get from outside, that is a road, not instantly, but it is a road that leads to arrogance in my experience. And certainly I personally have some experience with that. When I had certain positions, I got arrogant and I got myself in trouble because of it, and so I have bad experience with that and can speak firsthand. Real self-esteem is just an understanding, an awareness of your true divine capabilities and ability to add good to the world. Sometimes without recognition, sometimes without attribution, sometimes without reward at all other than the fact that you know that you added good to the world. So that's to me what real self-esteem is, and it's grounded in humility, not arrogance. Others? Griswold, did we answer the question that you put in there to start with today, since you're...
Quite thoroughly, sir. Quite thoroughly. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having it, and I appreciate that. It sparked a chain of thought that I had written the 3 things I wanted to talk about anyway, but I saw that and I thought that that was a good place to start today, so thank you for that. Okay, other good folks, we're a little bit over time, so we're about done. If nobody else has anything, we can jump. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for attending Break the Cage today. We'll see you next Saturday. Next Saturday I will be in Alberta, but I might have the same airport background. No, I will have a different one. I will have taken some pictures up there. So thank you again for joining us today, and until next time, make some choices. Choose to do something different, and above all things, break the boundaries, break the cage.